we're going to say private property ownership and gun ownership are essential elements of freedom. We're going to protect them. We're going to get rid of property tax in Texas, and we're going to do it in the next session. Marie told me that Senator Dan Patrick today was on the radio saying that we couldn't get it done, and I'm going to say to Senator Patrick, just because you haven't figured it out, sit down and watch. We're going to get it done in the next session. We're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. And you know, it's just not me talking pie in the sky. Some of you that have been watching Texas politics for a long time will know the name Talmadge Heflin. Mr. Heflin was longtime state representative from the Houston area. He is the Dean of the Texas Appropriations. He served as the chair of the House Committee on Appropriations. He knows state finance as well as anybody in this state. He was published in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram the Sunday after the last debate saying, not only can we get it done, it's the right thing to do and it'll be relatively simple. So sit down, Dan, and watch. We're going to get it done because we've been having this discussion for a year. When I stepped into this race, I began preparing then to govern Texas. I knew that there was a lot of work to do and a lot of opportunity. And I knew first we had to look at our state and figure out that what we've been doing to stop that aggressive overgrowth of government hasn't been working. We can keep all day long sending conservatives to Washington, D.C., and we continue to get bigger and bigger government. So how do we protect Texas? The first thing is we have to understand what protects freedom, and that's private property and guns. So check, got that. Get rid of property tax, severely curtail the abuse and overuse of eminent domain in this state, make sure that we understand private property is private property. This country was founded to protect life, liberty, and property. We're going to protect those first because they're fundamental elements of freedom. Secondly, we're going to recognize that we've got to restore a proper balance between a limited federal government and a sovereign state. I've toured and spoken with Sheriff Richard Mack from Arizona, and Sheriff Mack at an event in Houston said, do you know what that means, what that word sovereign means? It means there's no authority above you. If Texas is sovereign, there's no authority over her. The U.S. government has limited authority, and it is prescribed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. They have no other authority. So when they take an illegal, unconstitutional federal action, don't give it the credit of law. It is not law. It is illegal federal action. It will have no effect here. Jefferson said it is the unquestionable right of the state to determine when the federal government steps outside of that compact, and the rightful remedy is nullification and interposition. When Texas has a spine, when Texas leadership has a spine, because Texans have a spine, we haven't had leaders who would stand in the gap for us and say, you're not coming in and doing that to our state. This campaign issued a call to action the day after the House passed the health care bill. We've been talking about nullification for quite some time. I had been saying that we've got to get the federal government out of Texas, and you tell me where we start. Some would say education. The Texas Constitution says in order that our children would understand liberty, the state of Texas will provide a free public education for the general dissemination of knowledge. Perhaps we should tell Washington, we don't need you telling us how to teach our kids. We'll teach our kids in Texas. Get out of education. Some may have noticed there's a little ag industry in this state. And perhaps we should tell Washington, D.C. that we've been farming and ranching in Texas for a lot longer even than they've been around. We don't need your help in farming and ranching. Get out of agriculture in Texas. Some of you too may know there's an energy sector here. And maybe we ought to get Washington out of energy. And then the health care thing started to pick up real steam. And the bill passed on a Saturday night, and on Sunday morning, we issued a call to action. Not something I did on my own, but I have championed the notion, you know, in that First Amendment Bill of Rights, it says we have the right to free speech and press and religion, and we forget about assembly. Had a man in San Antonio some months ago now remind me that freedom of assembly was listed there because the founders understood there was wisdom in the minds of men. I've done everything I can to draw from the wisdom of Texans. This has been a We Texans Common Sense, Common Values campaign. It's that way because I'm traveling all over the state and I'm looking you in the eye and I'm listening to your wisdom. And we're going to draw that, and on Saturday night after that bill passed, my phone started ringing. My staff was meeting in a retreat planning this campaign, and they said, Debra, you got to issue a call to action. I said, y'all write it, I can't think straight. Get it to me. I proofed it on the way to church Sunday morning, and it went out. Thank God Al Gore invented the internet, and it went out Sunday morning. And it said, 13 of our sister states have already drafted nullification language against health care. Call your state representative, call your state senator, encourage them to read the language in those other bills, and then let's everybody call the governor and prevail upon him to call a special session in Texas and get that nullification language written and passed to protect Texas. I had a meeting that Monday morning with Congressman Ted Poe, and I had set that up some weeks before. It just incidentally fell on the day after, the Monday after the health care bill passed. I wanted to visit with Congressman Poe about nullification. He is an attorney. He has sat on the bench as a district judge, and he now sits in the U.S. Congress. I thought he would have a perspective on nullification. I wanted to visit with him. And I said, it's my understanding, sir, that the Attorney General of the state of Texas could file a brief in the court today to challenge the constitutionality of that federal bill. And he said, well, not until the bill's signed, but once the bill's signed, yes. He can drop a brief. None of us have to do anything. He's been elected to that office. He can defend Texas. I said, well, if we manage to get a special session, and mind you, I'm not holding my breath, but if we get a special session and we nullified that kind of action, would that help? He said, yes, it would give the Attorney General a second cause of action in the federal court. Not only is it unconstitutional, it's illegal in the great state of Texas. You cannot mandate that everybody have health care. Furthermore, he said you might consider asking the Attorney General to seek an injunction against the IRS. See, the minute that bill is signed, all of us face a new liability from the IRS. For each month or portion thereof that you don't have an acceptable health insurance policy, you will pay a new penalty to the IRS. You and I can't fight that by ourselves. We cannot challenge the IRS. The great state of Texas can stand in the gap for her citizens. The great state of Texas in federal court can seek an injunction to prevent the IRS from levying that additional penalty on us until such time as that litigation fully goes through the court and its constitutionality is determined. Some of you will pay that fine anyway in hopes you'll get a refund whenever we win that case. And others of you say, no, I'll keep my money, and if we lose, I'll pay up whenever it comes due. But that's how your state can stand in the gap and protect you from that overreaching Fed. A couple of weeks later, I bumped into Senator John Cornyn, and I said, Senator Cornyn, the health care bill is now in the Senate, and y'all are talking about it. Are you aware, sir, that 13 states have already drafted legislation to nullify that bill? And he said, no, I'm not. And I said, well, it's been my contention that Texas ought to be making a lot of noise. We ought to be rattling sabers and saying, Washington, you pass that bill and we're going to meet you at the federal courthouse the next day. And we're going to fight you. You are not shoving this at Texas. You're not shoving one more unconstitutional piece of legislation at us.